Welcome to Defining Dad Bod, where my dad, Coach Alex VanHouten, posts his 14 years of experience to work for you. You should listen to him. Here's pretty beast mode. Who knows who we could be if we could become 1% better every single day.
What's up, guys? This is Alex VanHouten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. You're listening to Season 3, Episode 9 of Defining Dad Bod, where we're going to talk about magnesium supplementation. This is an awesome conversation that applies both to the athletic end of the spectrum and to those who are working to lose fat and gain muscle tissue in a way that's sustainable and long-term. I'm excited to dive into it with you. First, our food for thought, then our housekeeping, and then we'll get to it. Your food for thought this week comes courtesy of an answer I got to one of the social media questions that I posted to our community. I asked dads, what do you do for your me time? And how often do you get it? The answers varied quite a lot. Some guys aren't getting any me time at all and said, hey, me time, what's that? Other guys see their workouts, their devotional time in the morning, and even time spent reading and writing as me time. Still others said that time at work and the commute in between is the only me time they're getting in a week. And so it was a really interesting thread. One dad took some time to tell us about an epiphany he had when his sons were 12 and 13. He said he'd bought a motorcycle and made it a point once a week to go riding with his friends and to take a trip one weekend out of every month. He said for a solid 2 years, he'd ride his motorcycle with his buddies, feeling guilty the entire time that he wasn't spending the time he needed to spend with his family. And then a mentor he looked up to said, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, man, but you do only get about 12 to 14 years to pour into your children in a way that will make an impact. After that, their energies will be directed elsewhere, and their influences will be their friends, their teachers and coaches, their mentors, and even society at large. Maybe you feel guilty because deep down you believe that this time would be better spent pouring into them. He said he sold his bike, and he doubled down on his relationship with his sons. He took them on hunting trips and fishing trips, went hiking more often with them, and now that they're grown up, he says he's glad he did it, because he wouldn't trade that time for anything, and seeing the men they've become makes him believe that it made a difference. Personally, my boys are pretty young, ages 5 and 1, and my me time is getting up about an hour earlier than everybody else, so I can drink my coffee, read and write, maybe get started with work before the house gets loud and crazy. And while I work out very regularly, I don't know if I would consider that me time, given how often I'm interrupted, and given how generally unpleasant and difficult it can be to train with Ehlers-Danlos, but that's a conversation for another day. There are times in fatherhood where I think, man, I just need a break, and maybe I do. Lord knows I would love to go fishing all by myself every Saturday. I love the way the peaceful water reflects the sky like glass, and how the birds chirping and the frogs croaking early in the morning bring a certain grace and peace to the whole going fishing endeavor. And the times in my life I've gotten to do that, I'm usually not there for the fish. But his comment made me think, how many mornings might I have a decade and a half from now, where I get to enjoy a nice quiet morning, I didn't have to move heaven and earth to make it happen, and so I've got all the me time I've ever wanted. And even more importantly, a decade and a half from now, how many of those mornings spent fishing will I be thinking about how I wish I'd done this with my boys more often? Everybody's got their own reasons for needing some me time, but I hope for you and your me time is that your time is not just time well spent and enjoyed with friends or in an activity you love, but that it makes you a better husband or wife, father or mother, man or woman. Me time that's productive in practice and unselfish in outcome. If working out makes you a better father, reduces your anxiety levels, improves your ability to keep up with your kids, and helps them to see what non-toxic masculinity looks like. Or if getting up a little earlier to read and write clears your head, helps you to think before you speak, and maybe even sets some direction and tone for the way you're going to run your house this week, then maybe we should call that something other than me time. I'd love to know your thoughts. Shoot me a message at coachal@definingdadbod.com. That's your food for thought. I hope it gives you something to chew on. And now for our housekeeping. In the Defining Dad Bod Inner Circle this week, we're doing something new. I, Coach Al, am doing a live movement workshop in my garage gym, where we're going to focus on getting the most out of specific movements. Many of the clients that I've worked with in the last 14 years have been doing movements in a way that isn't giving them the most bang for their buck. And with a small bit of coaching here and there, we can significantly improve your results. For instance, one of my clients this week was amazed at how much better his chest felt and his shoulders felt when, instead of using the preset on his decline bench, I instructed him to elevate the lower end of the bench with 2 plates, which still gave him a decline, but reduced the angle. He got a greater range of motion in his chest, his shoulders were well protected, and with the exact same weight as he usually does, he got to experience some delayed onset muscle soreness in the next 48 hours, which told him that that workout worked his chest in a way that he hasn't been working it. And that's just one tiny example of some of the things that we're going to be covering in our movement workshop. This is a new thing, it's experimental, and I hope you'll join us for it. Find out more information at definingdadbod.com/innercircle. I'll be posting a link to register. There'll be 6 slots, and you can join us for $10. I'd love for you to join us, get some pro tips on improving these movements, and if the slots fill up, we'll look to open up a few more spots in the coming weeks. For more information on the workshop itself, or the actual movements we'll be covering together, you'll find that post in the Inner Circle. I've done a bit of coaching through Zoom, and what I can tell you is that it's going to be a blast, and it's going to be valuable. I hope to see you there. Go to the Inner Circle and register, or make a post telling me what movements you're struggling with in your workouts, so I can have an idea of what I can cover that would be valuable to you. Now, without further ado, let's talk about magnesium and what supplementing with it can do for you. I was introduced to magnesium supplementation about 12 years ago as a personal trainer in reading a book by Dr. Jim Lavelle called Cracking the Metabolic Code. He had a number of claims of what magnesium supplementation could do for somebody's metabolism, and I was intrigued. But what caught my attention most as a personal trainer was the deep explanation of how magnesium could affect the flexibility of muscle tissue. And as we'll see today when we dive into the research of magnesium, there are many other things that it's been found to affect. But 12 years ago, I was in it for the flexibility. I'll never forget working with a client who had peripheral arterial disease, which is a very frustrating and debilitating condition, wherein as you start to become active, your arteries in your legs start to shut down, and so your muscles cramp terribly because they're not getting any nutrients or oxygen, because they're not getting enough blood flow. This poor guy had it rough. He was in his mid-50s, and in our first session together, he could only do about 2 minutes of cardiovascular exercise before he had to stop because his calves and his thighs were cramping so badly. Another thing I noticed in our very first session together is that in a flexibility assessment, his hands wouldn't go past his knees. I remembered what I was reading at the time, and I suggested that he ask his doctor about supplementing magnesium. He's like, "Man, whatever you say, I'll try it." In our very next session, a week later, I noticed in our stretches, he got much further in his stretch, at least 3 to 4 inches closer to his feet. And I was like, "Wow, you've been practicing." And he said, "No, I haven't been practicing, but I did start taking that magnesium supplement you recommended." And I was blown away. In the 2 years that I'd been training people, I'd never seen anybody increase their flexibility that much in that short a period of time, especially without practice. And thereafter, over the last 12 years, I've seen that story played out again and again with regard to flexibility for magnesium. You see, magnesium is one of 7 electrolytes that our body requires in order to regulate different electrical functions in the body. For this particular phenomenon, it's important to know that to contract muscle tissue, calcium ions are required to allow muscle fibers to shorten, and magnesium does the opposite job, so that in order to lengthen, muscle fibers require magnesium ions to counter the effect of calcium ions. That is to say, muscles can't relax without enough magnesium present. And while, like I said, there are many other effects that we're going to talk about today, for this reason alone in personal training, magnesium supplementation ranks higher than any other supplement that I recommend regularly. And since very few people are like me with Ehlers-Danlos, that is, hypermobile, able to put the palms of your hands on the floor and hyperextend your knees without a thought, magnesium supplementation is higher on my priority list than anything that I've covered so far. So let's talk about magnesium. What is it? What has it been researched to do? How do I use it with my clients? And in my personal practice, what magnesium supplements are best? And how might you get more from the foods that you're eating? All solid questions. So here we go. As I said before, magnesium is one of 7 electrolytes that your body requires in order to function properly. In case you're curious about the other 6, those are sodium, chloride, potassium, calcium, phosphate, and bicarbonate. Now each of these electrolytes are extremely important. Your body can't thrive, let alone survive, without any one of them. But it turns out that magnesium, compared to the other 6, is among the harder to consume in our standard American diet. And for this reason, most people that I encounter who are working toward a health and fitness goal, especially related to body composition, that is fat loss and muscle growth, are suboptimal with regard to their magnesium levels. Now it's worth noting that suboptimal and deficient are not the same thing. Deficient refers to a state in which you're experiencing disease-like symptoms because you don't have an adequate intake of a mineral or vitamin. A good example of this is a disease called scurvy, which is a deficiency in vitamin C, or rickets, which is a deficiency in vitamin D. On the other hand, though, just because you're not experiencing disease-like symptoms of a lack of a vitamin or mineral does not mean you're at an optimal level with regard to that vitamin or mineral. Like my friend 12 years ago, he wasn't deficient in magnesium, but his significant increase in flexibility with just 1 week of supplementation showed that he definitely wasn't optimal with regard to magnesium intake. You won't hear magnesium deficiency spoken about in the doctor's office regularly because it's actually very difficult to measure the amount of magnesium in your cells. However, if you're listening to the sound of my voice, it's very possible that you've had your vitamin D tested, and many studies have shown that magnesium deficiency and low vitamin D are well correlated, such that those with low vitamin D can actually improve their vitamin D level by simply supplementing with magnesium. I actually started recording a vitamin D episode today, and then stopped to record the magnesium episode instead, because while vitamin D is extremely important, and we'll get to that later in the series, if you have insufficient magnesium in your bones, your bloodstream, and your tissues, then it's going to be very difficult to improve your serum vitamin D levels. And so if the egg comes before the chicken, which is true by the way, because reptiles laid eggs far before there were chickens, then magnesium's the egg and vitamin D's the chicken. We'll get to the chicken later. So what do we have so far? Magnesium's important. Many people are suboptimal with regard to their magnesium levels and they don't know it. And if you are currently, or have experienced in the past, vitamin D deficiency, then it's very likely that you would benefit from magnesium supplementation. Alright, so we'd probably benefit from magnesium supplementation. What are those benefits? Well, as in previous episodes of the supplement series, I've linked the research in the show notes below, in case you're interested in reading up on it yourself. But since magnesium is a foundational electrolyte that affects many systems in the body, it's amazing to me what positive benefits come from magnesium supplementation in the research. And while these are fascinating and powerful, you won't find my flexibility results among this list because it's yet to be replicated in a double-blind placebo-controlled trial among the general population. But that won't stop my clients from getting an edge. So here are those effects. In athletes specifically, a significant increase in aerobic exercise capacity and in muscle oxygenation was found with magnesium supplementation. That means in conditioned individuals, by increasing the amount of magnesium available in their bloodstream, researchers found that they could handle much higher intensities for much longer and were able to measure much more oxygen in the tissues of muscles. Now, more research is needed to know if these benefits affect the general population as well as conditioned athletes. But it is a well-studied phenomenon that being dehydrated, which is not only a lack of water, but also a lack of electrolytes, can significantly hamper athletic performance. And while I recommend magnesium supplementation to my clients regularly, it's hard to know how much of their progress from a cardiovascular standpoint is just a product of their hard work versus magnesium supplementation. But for those who are well conditioned and aren't currently taking a magnesium supplement, I would recommend giving it a shot and seeing if you improve your aerobic performance. While those effects are exciting and robust, the next 4 effects are way more relevant to the body composition change world. And that is lowered blood glucose and A1C, lowered insulin, increased insulin sensitivity, and decreased blood pressure. 2.5 years ago, I published a series called The Hormone Pyramid, and in it I worked hard to construct not only the argument, but also the practice of optimizing our hormones to improve our body composition rather than simply counting calories. I've built a lot on that work since then, but one of the things that will still always hold true from the Hormone Pyramid in my own coaching practice is an emphasis on insulin sensitivity and blood sugar regulation. If you don't take anything else away from me today, you can't burn fat well unless your body knows how to utilize carbohydrates and is not constantly riding the blood sugar roller coaster. I've put the link in the show notes below if you're interested in learning more about what regulating glucose and insulin can do for your body composition, your energy levels, and your overall health and well-being. But for our purposes today, I want you to know that magnesium supplementation has been shown, all by itself, without dietary changes, exercise changes, or anything else special, to lower fasting blood glucose, and 3 months later, A1C, which is a good indicator of long-term blood glucose in the bloodstream. And not only that, but it's also lowered insulin. which is an important hormone in the body that, if it's high, makes it very difficult for the body to tap into your fat stores. Lastly, though, and most importantly, magnesium supplementation improved insulin sensitivity. That's a big deal because it suggests that magnesium supplementation all by itself will improve your body's ability to regulate blood sugar, will reduce the hormone that makes it hard to use fat as a fuel source, and it will improve it for the long haul by making your cells more responsive to the hormones that regulate blood sugar. Now, I might be more excited about these effects than you are because I know as a personal trainer, it takes months and months of dietary habit change to see the kinds of improvements in blood glucose, insulin, and insulin sensitivity that those supplementing with magnesium find in just a few short weeks. And while I hope you know by now that the idea of supplement use is not to be a magic bullet so that you don't have to make any other changes in your nutrition, it is important to me that clients see relatively fast returns on their investments in themselves, especially if it means returns for the long haul. And there are no indications that discontinuing magnesium supplementation immediately elevates blood glucose or insulin or reduces insulin sensitivity. That is to say, if you can supplement magnesium while you're working to make improvements to your nutrition, you'll see better, faster, and more long-term results. A side note about these effects regarding magnesium is that it seems that obesity, that is clinically a BMI over 30, seems to be one of the primary risk factors of magnesium deficiency. And since obesity is often related to poor blood glucose regulation, poor insulin sensitivity, and too much insulin in the bloodstream, then unless contraindicated, any of my clients who are wrestling with obesity are immediately fantastic candidates for magnesium supplementation. And so we found that athletes would benefit from magnesium supplementation, and those on the opposite end of the body composition spectrum would also benefit from magnesium supplementation. But you also heard me mention a decrease in blood pressure. Remember when I said that muscles contract thanks to calcium ions, and muscles are able to relax thanks to magnesium ions? Well, are you aware that your cardiac tissue, that is your heart and your arteries, are a special kind of muscle tissue, and that the less able they are to relax, the more likely you are to have high blood pressure? One of the most powerful and robust effects of magnesium supplementation is lowered blood pressure. This is especially important in those who've been taking calcium in order to prevent things like osteoporosis, but because of the increased calcium ions in their bloodstream, have inadvertently increased their blood pressure. The good news is you can balance out your calcium intake with magnesium, and the better news is 50% of your magnesium is stored in your bones. And so having calcium and magnesium together actually improves some of the bone density markers that you're trying to improve anyway. It's a win-win, and you're welcome. This effect on blood pressure, however, plays into some of the contraindications we'll talk about, because if you're already being treated for high blood pressure, especially with a calcium channel blocker, and you add magnesium on top of that, you could be making a bad situation worse, and we don't want that. The last studied effect, that needs more research, but is still pretty impressive, is improved sleep quality. Now, we know that the nervous system is split into two primary components, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible largely for the things that you can control with your conscious mind. Things like muscle contractions, speech, and even the fight or flight response, where you get to make a decision whether you're going to fight or run, are all sympathetic nervous system functions. The parasympathetic nervous system, on the other hand, is more related to relaxation functions and subconscious functions that you don't control. Things like muscles lengthening, falling asleep, or heartbeat, and peristalsis in the digestive system. Now, since one is usually related to stress, and the other is related to relaxation, I often think of the sympathetic nervous system as calcium-dominated, whereas the parasympathetic nervous system is magnesium-dominated. Now, I'm not sure how accurate that is from a scientific perspective, except that most of the time it seems to line up, and so it would stand to reason that magnesium supplementation would improve sleep quality. Even though we're not really quite sure why that is, it might turn out that there are only certain populations for whom improved sleep quality is a thing with regard to magnesium supplementation. It might also turn out that the magnesium supplementation is only helping with vitamin D synthesis, and it's the vitamin D that improves the sleep quality secondarily, and not the magnesium primarily. Who knows? But like I said, the research is in the show notes below, in the case that you want to read up on it. Just know if you're wrestling with your sleep quality, that in addition to the effects that we've already discussed, magnesium supplementation could help you improve that. Alright, so that's the science. Magnesium supplementation can improve aerobic exercise capacity and muscle oxygenation among athletes. In obese individuals, it can improve blood glucose regulation and affect the A1C, insulin, and insulin sensitivity. And then in everybody else, magnesium lowers blood pressure and seems to improve sleep quality. So now, how do I use magnesium with my clients? Do I use it myself? What are the best magnesium supplements to consume? And can I eat this in my diet? All good questions. With my clients, I generally recommend magnesium supplementation in the first month of their program. And even though, like I said, there's no double-blind placebo-controlled trial to help with the whole flexibility thing, that's actually the primary effect that I see for my clients. You see, when you first start a workout program, and your trainer recommends that you rest and stretch on day 3 in order to give your body some time to recover, you realize you can't touch your toes, and you're very tight and sore from your workouts. Oftentimes you'll say to your trainer, "How do I improve my flexibility? I am so stiff and tight, and I hate it." And that's about the time and place where we start our conversation about magnesium supplementation. The other effects, boosted blood sugar regulation, insulin optimization, and aerobic development because of muscle oxygenation, are all fantastic and welcome side effects that support my clients getting the best results they can in a very short period of time, but with an eye for the future. Most of my clients continue magnesium supplementation as needed throughout the entirety of their training program. And as I'll talk about with myself, there are different seasons in life that seem to call for it more than others. Now, there are a few contraindications, that is, reasons why you shouldn't take magnesium regularly, and so I want to list those here. First, if you're being treated with a calcium channel blocker for high blood pressure, then you're going to want to talk to your doctor about taking magnesium. If your doctor's open to it, starting with a small dose of it and increasing your magnesium supplement might actually be the key to helping you reduce or even eliminate your blood pressure medications. Don't do this on your own. Do it with the help of a medical professional. But the last thing I want for you is to be taking your blood pressure medication and your magnesium and then faint at work. Low blood pressure is no joke. Another contraindication is kidney disease. Now, those who are actually going through dialysis with kidney disease find that magnesium supplementation helps with muscle cramps. But if you're in the beginning stages of kidney disease, or you suspect that your kidneys aren't functioning super awesome, then let the medical professional who's monitoring your kidneys know that you've started a magnesium supplement, and they can track the relevant markers to make sure that your kidneys aren't bothered by it. Remember, magnesium is one of 7 essential electrolytes. Your body's used to handling it. The question is, how much is best for you? The next contraindication is if you're currently treating diabetes with insulin, you want to be careful about magnesium supplementation. Magnesium can affect the way that insulin affects the body and how quickly and drastically your body responds to insulin. Remember, I said magnesium has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity, which means that if you're supplementing magnesium while treating yourself with insulin, you might need a little less insulin to get the job done. Again, worth giving your medical professional a shout before you end up with low blood sugar. Also, medications like antibiotics, warfarin, and levothyroxine can all be affected in their ability to be absorbed when supplementing magnesium. It turns out that having a large concentration of magnesium ions in the stomach at the same time as consuming those medications limits your body's ability to absorb those medications. It's not completely contraindicated that you supplement with magnesium, it's just contraindicated that you consume your magnesium at the same time as those medications. There are also some autoimmune disorders that affect the nervous system for which magnesium supplementation might be a problem. If you're already having trouble with muscle contraction, remember, magnesium tends to relax the muscles, and if you're having a hard time with muscle contraction, then adding more magnesium to the mix might not be the best thing for you. Those are the contraindications that the scientific community knows about. As for me and my practice, very few of my clients are contraindicated for magnesium intake, and unless you have something going on this list, like I said, it's worth a shot. As for me, I incorporate magnesium supplementation especially in the summer. Here in the humid heat of Arkansas, you sweat like a dog no matter what you're doing. P.S. Why do we say sweat like a dog? Dogs don't even sweat, except for their nose. But really though, in the summer, I generally supplement magnesium for every workout. I mix 1 scoop of my magnesium supplement with my electrolytes, my creatine, and my caffeine, and I usually consume it the hour before my workout. I also use it similar to the way that I use fish oil, in the sense that if I'm unable to eat the foods that normally have magnesium in them throughout the winter, then I have my magnesium supplement on hand to shore up that gap. We'll talk about those foods in a minute, but you've heard me talk about them before on the show, and so I doubt it'll be a surprise to you that I generally consume quite a high amount of them, and I recommend my clients do as well. Now, what magnesium supplement to take? I have the one that I take in the show notes below by Thorne Research, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how different magnesium supplements absorb in our system. One of the potential side effects of consuming a magnesium supplement is diarrhea. The reason for that is a high concentration of magnesium salts present in the large intestine will actually take water from the large intestine walls and keep it in the food. Watery food in your large intestine means diarrhea. And so if you're taking a magnesium supplement that doesn't absorb very well, then you're going to end up with a laxative effect. There was a study done in 2016 that did a really good job at looking at the relative absorption of different magnesium compounds in the digestive system. It was a well-crafted study. I'm happy they did it because they were able to compare 5 different magnesium compounds and show the rates at which they were absorbed. The more absorption, the less likely you are to get a laxative effect, and the more likely you are to get magnesium to the actual tissues you want it to go to. At the bottom of the list, magnesium oxide and magnesium citrate. These 2 compounds have the lowest absorption rate, and so if you're looking for a laxative effect, magnesium oxide and magnesium citrate would be the ones to go for. In fact, if you've heard of milk of magnesia, that's usually magnesium oxide, and it's marketed as a laxative. Again, those are the least absorbed, they end up in the large intestine, and the laxative effect is forthcoming. Now the next level up from that is called magnesium malate, and you could think of this as kind of the middle of the road. It gets absorbed into the bloodstream, but only about half as effective as the other 2 that I'm going to talk about. If you're taking magnesium malate, it's very possible you're getting some of the positive benefits, but it's also possible you could do better. At the top of the list, for most absorption into the bloodstream, and the least likely to be left in the large intestine, is magnesium bisglycinate, both chelate and buffered. Magnesium bisglycinate, that is bisglycinate, comes chelated and buffered, and both of those absorb about 100% more readily than magnesium malate and 2.5 times more readily than magnesium citrate and magnesium oxide. And so when I recommend magnesium to my clients, I'm very specific about which one I recommend. The more you absorb, the less you have to take. The less you have to take, the less likely you are to end up with diarrhea, and I don't want people to have diarrhea on my watch. And so if you ask me, I recommend you find a good magnesium bisglycinate, and I think Thorne Research does a good job with theirs. They add a little citric acid to it to make it taste lemony, and so altogether, it's a pleasant experience with pleasant effects. Can't beat that. In full disclosure, the link in the show notes below is our Amazon affiliate link. So if you do pick up the magnesium bisglycinate through that link, you've effectively donated $2 to the show, and we appreciate you. Now the big question, can you get magnesium from your diet? Just like our previous conversation about fish oil in episode 7, the answer is an emphatic yes. There are plenty of sources of magnesium that you can incorporate into your diet. However, unlike fish oil, there are several sources of magnesium that I feel are contraindicated for the population who would benefit from increased magnesium. More on that in a second. Here's a list of the top 10 foods with the highest levels of magnesium that you can incorporate into your diet. Dark chocolate, avocados, nuts, legumes like peanuts or beans, tofu, seeds, chia and flax are my favorite, whole grains, fatty fish, bananas, and leafy greens. That's quite the list, right? If you've heard this entire podcast and you're like, man, I need to increase the amount of magnesium in my diet, and you'd prefer to incorporate these foods rather than taking a magnesium supplement, by all means, get it done. But for the population of people who generally do coaching with me, one of the things that I find is a desire to increase their magnesium as fast as possible, while also helping them to manage their macronutrients. Foods like chocolate, avocado, bananas, nuts, and whole grains all have a significant amount of either carbs or fats. And while somebody's wrestling to make sure their macronutrients are in line with what they need to do for this phase of training, I generally don't want them worrying about whether or not they're getting enough magnesium in their food. For my part as a coach, I emphasize fatty fish, which is a nice lean protein with great omega-3s and magnesium. But I also find that about 1 to 2 changes in somebody's dietary habits every month or 2 is the max most people can handle in addition to everything else that's coming their way. So personally, I find a magnesium supplement to be a wonderful way to boost your results in the short term with an eye on the long term, while also working toward improving your dietary intake so that maybe you don't have to be so reliant on a supplement. Now regardless, I eat these foods on a regular basis, primarily whole grains, fatty fish, and leafy greens. But I still take a magnesium supplement in the summer because of how much is expelled when I sweat and how important the health of my muscle tissue is to keeping my tendons, my ligaments, and my joints in the best shape possible with Ehlers-Danlos. However you want to do it, be my guest. But now you have the facts. If you have questions about magnesium supplementation, or you'd like us to cover a specific supplement in this series for you, join the Inner Circle at definingdadbod.com/inner circle and drop your question there. Our free online community is an awesome place for special offers, live Q&As, and just a great place to meet awesome people who are working to become 1% better every single day. This series wouldn't exist without their awesome questions and without the awesome support of our listeners. and I'd love for you to be a part of that community. That's definingdadbod.com/inner circle. This has been Alex VanHouten with Defining Dad Bod. Thanks for listening, and until next time, guys, kick butt, take names.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The free, practical advice and conversations here remain unbought and unbiased, thanks to the support of listeners just like you. If this episode's been helpful to you, please share it with somebody in your life who you know it will benefit. Then, subscribe to the podcast and leave us a raving review to tell others what value Defining Dad Bod has brought to your health and fitness journey. And finally, if you want more Defining Dad Bod, consider joining our online community. We send a lot of free perks and resources your way, and I, Coach Alex, go live every month to talk through our listeners' health and fitness questions to make the practical science of this show applicable to everyday life. Everyone's welcome, and we'd love to have you. For more information about joining the Inner Circle or becoming a supporter of the Defining Dad Bod podcast, go to definingdadbod.com/inner circle. That's definingdadbod.com/inner circle.